How's everyone doing? I'm going to be talking about the different seeding equipment and also talking about planting green. So um, please keep the discussion lively and ask questions, and because some of it will come up, and it's we've been the other groups we just discussed planting green as we were talking about the equipment. So over here, let's start out with the roller crimper. So the roller crimper, that's designed as a mechanical termination of cover crops for mainly organic, because of course with organic you're not able to use herbicides to terminate. So that is a good method of terminating cover crops. You can mow too, but that causes problems. It has issues itself, but rolling works well because it lays down the cover, and it's easier to plant through cover crop that's been laid down. Ideally, you put that on the front of your tractor, and it'd be the same width as your seeding equipment. So you'd be seeding your corn or soybeans in and rolling in the front, planting in the back, and everything would be laid down in the direction you're planting. You wouldn't want to, it gets tricky to just roll first and then plant after, because you'll end up with at least some of it, you'll be going against the grain of how you rolled, so that can cause it to bunch up and interfere with your planting. A lot of conventional farmers, they don't bother with that. They'll just plant right directly into the standing cover crop, just like we show here. We have these three pieces of equipment where we just planted right into the standing cover, just as you see over there, the rye and the crimson clover. And I tried to demonstrate what it would look like if you rolled it and didn't roll it. This year is half. This half was rolled for this corn and soybean planter, and this half we didn't roll ahead of time. Now, the two other groups tended to trample this down a little bit, but there wasn't that much difference. If you look back down there, you can see more of what it looked like. There's some of the rye still standing, but a lot of it was knocked down by the planter. There isn't a huge difference between rolling and not rolling. After you plant, a lot of the rye gets knocked down, a lot of the crimson clover gets knocked down. Now you can see some of these rows see this row here, we just rolled that, and you can see a lot of the crimson clover bounce back up again. That tends to be an issue with crimson clover. The ideal stage to roll is when it's in mid-bloom. So the rye, this is a perfect time to roll. That's the best time to roll, when it's in mid-bloom, because that's when the plants are susceptible to dying after it's rolled. If you do it too early, the plants will bounce back and regrow. However, with the crimson clover, they tend to bounce back more than others. With the hairy vetch, mid-bloom is good. That generally makes a pretty good kill. But that's usually, hairy vetch blooms a bit later than rye or crimson clover. Talk a little bit about the equipment, the seeding equipment now, and then we'll get back into talking a little bit more planting green. Over there we have three different pieces of broadcast seeders. One that the large cone shape, that's you can use that to spread fertilizer or spread seed. Some farmers like to use that because they can go really fast with it. You don't have to go as slow as when you're doing a drill or the other type of broadcast seeder. However, it's definitely not going to be as accurate, and you're going to be limited for what type of seed you can put down. Just both from the size of the seed, you generally need to use a larger seed with that, and also what seed can germinate with less soil to seed contact. The other two pieces of equipment, that red one there is a Brillion seeder, and the yellow one is a Trillion seeder, which is the same bottom as the Brillion, but the Trillion has the Truax seed boxes on the top, where it's made for, the middle box is made for native seeds, so like wildflowers and warm season grasses. Mainly that middle box was made for some of the fluffy warm season grasses that tend to bind up and just not flow. So it's got corkscrew flaps in it that work back and forth, the seed back and forth, and there's a picker wheel that pulls the seed down. Now you can also, and then it has the regular larger grain box where you're going to plant, you're going to put your like rye in or your hairy vetch in. That's got fluted wheels that meter the seed down, and it's a larger box. So when you have larger seed, you're gonna plant more of a volume. And then the other side, you have the same thing. It's just a smaller seed box and smaller fluted wheels. That allows you to plant more accurately smaller seeds, like crimson clover. So I'll pass these out so you can just kind of see those. And I also have the crimson clover. It's both the same variety. It's Kentucky Pride crimson clover, but I have coated seed and uncoated seed. Just so you can see, there's not much size difference, but it's going to impact. You're always going to want to pay attention when you plant your seed to whether it's coated or uncoated, because that's going to impact your seeding rate. You're gonna have to adjust for the percentage of coating and raise your rate up. You're welcome to go over and look at the boxes on those on that yellow planter there. That's the same boxes on top of that planter over there. But that's a no-till seed drill. So instead of the Brilliant bottom, it's got a seed drill at the bottom. So the Brilliant bottom works. This is designed for soil that's been tilled. So soil that's loose. And these front, this is similar to a cultipacker. This seeder we actually just use as a cultipacker now instead of just the seeding part of it's broken, the chains are broken. So, but how it works is these flutes press into the soil, make a furrow, then the seed drops down between the front wheels and the back wheels, and then the back wheels are very similar, they're just a little smaller, and they're offset to push in between the front furrows, so it pushes the soil over the seed that was dropped in the furrows that made by the front wheels. That middle box there, we often haven't used that middle box because if you're planting native seed, you're often planting a low seed rate, and you often need to bulk up the seed anyway. So, and if you don't have a lot of fluffy seed in there, often bulking it up will fix your problem with the fluffy seed, and you don't really need to use the middle box, which is tricky to use. So you're better off just using that front large seed box with bulked up seed, and it works a lot better. So this is something that we've talked about in the other groups, the bulking of seed. Has anyone run into that issue and needed to bulk up seed to get, because the seed rate was too low for the piece of equipment? Right. Because what you don't want to do is narrow down those flutes on that seeder so tiny that they're not going to stay perfectly in that position. So if you bring those down too tiny, then what could happen is as you're seeding, it might move on you, and you might end up getting nothing coming out, or you might get 2 or 3 times as much seed coming out. So you don't want to go that low on your adjustment. You want to bulk up your seed so you can go a little bit higher, like probably at least a quarter of that flute out, so that at least I would say at least a 1/4 inch of that flute out, so you don't have such a large percentage of that flute going in or out as you're driving, and it's moving just a little bit in as you're seeding. So for bulking agents, has anyone heard what kind of bulking agents they've used or heard of? Peat moss, really?
Yeah. It works apparently.
What else?
DNR uses peat moss.
Cat litter.
Cat litter. What else? Sand. So What do you think the best one is? Sand? What do you think the ideal bulking agent would be? Like, what's the properties for the ideal bulking agent? You don't want the seed to, what you want something that is very similar to the size and weight of the seed, the density of the seed, so you don't have separation. So sand is heavier than the seed, so it doesn't flow real well either. So, but nevertheless, your seed will tend to float on top of the sand, so that's not ideal, and it's gritty, and it's not going to be great for the equipment. Sawdust would be lighter than your seed, so that's not really ideal either. Although it'd be okay for like a really fluffy seed. But for like standard size, weight, density of the seed, that's not ideal. So, so most of the things that I've heard about using is either too heavy or too light, and it's not ideal for bulking. But what I found is that chicken feed, like the chicken feed crumble, that works quite well because it's made from seeds, and it flows reasonably well, but not too much. It's actually beneficial for it to not be too flowable, because then that just allows more stirring of the seed and separation of the seed. So that seems to work out really well. It's the right density. It's got a number of different sizes in there. So if you have different size seed in there, a mix of seeds, that they tend not to separate out. It keeps a nice mixture. So that's a tip.
What about the cost of the chicken feed versus?
It's like $15 a bag or something, which is that's really reasonable when you consider the cost of the seed and the cost of other bulking agents that you might use. I mean, it's actually cheaper than a lot of other things. Maybe not sawdust, but like kitty litter, it's going to be more expensive than kitty litter, and I mean less expensive than kitty litter. And kitty litter is probably a little too heavy. Well, it depends, I guess, on the kitty litter, but there's so many. It's hard to recommend kitty litter when there's like a million different versions of it. But chicken feed, like the crumbles, and I guess if you have a larger seed, you can use the pellets, I guess, for bulking. It's about the same density, and so that works really well. Now, the difference between drills and broadcast planters, these are made to get the seed down into the soil, have good seed to soil contact. They have 2 disc openers that go through the soil. First, they have coulters. They have these discs that cut into the soil. They'll cut residue and loosen the soil a little bit. This one in front of the coulters has some residue wheels that help move aside residue. Then you have double disc openers, and you guys can go ahead and look around the equipment while I'm talking so you can see what I'm talking about. Then you have double disc openers that open the soil up and the seed drops down. And then you have press wheels that follow behind and press the soil around. So on this here is a corn and soybean planter. It's very precise. It's made to meter out the seed very precisely. But just, it's designed, you have to have separate plates for corn. This is a plate for corn seeding. And this plate here is for soybean. And this thing is like very advanced. It's got radar to see to determine how fast you're traveling. It's got monitors that can detect if there's a clog and there's seeds coming out. So in the tractor, there's a screen that tells you what your seed population is at any time. And so if anything goes wrong, you can stop immediately and fix it. So that's why it's the same kind of seed drill methodology, but it's called a planter. And those are no-till seed drills, and all these are no-till. They're designed to plant into vegetation, either killed or unkilled. Now the the residue wheels out front, some people take those off, especially if they're replanting green. If there's a lot of material, they're really more designed for when you have residue or like on the soil and it moves this to the side. But if you have a lot of like long stems, they can catch it too much. So a lot of farmers will take those off and make sure there's no bolts sticking out. They'll cut down the bolts and make sure it's nice and smooth, so there's nothing catching, because you can just keep catching stems and build up a lot of stems if you're not careful. We haven't adjusted this thing at all, really, other than basic things. But yeah, we haven't really played around with this much. This is a corn and soybean planter, so the only thing we've done is swap out plates for corn and soybean. And so you got when we plant corn, we use the back four for the spacing of the corn, and then when we do soybeans, we use all of them, the front three as well. So you get the closer spacing of the rows. And then over here we have a Great Plains seed drill. This is a special piece of equipment. The front part is a standard Great Plains seed drill, and then the back part with the seat and the equipment up there, that is a cone seeder attachment, so that we can plant. It's designed so we can plant plots, because it's not fun to plant a plot with one of these other drills. Like we planted with that Truax there years ago. We planted wildflower plots with that, and you have to have a lot of extra seeds to charge the box, and it doesn't start when you want it. When it doesn't start coming out when you want it, so you got to do all, back it up and try to get it in the right spot. So it's not ideal for planting plots. Where this, it'll put out the exact amount of seed for your length of plot. The way it works is you pour your seed in there. When you get to the beginning of your plot, you dump the seed down on the cone, and that cone rotates around one rotation for that length of the plot. So you weigh exact amount of seed out for that size of the plot, and then you just keep traveling down. You can do one plot after the other. So that's really helpful for our plot work here, but it's not something a farmer would use. So that seed drill has the same standard large seed box in the front. It has a small seed box in the back. It also has, so this is a small seed box. This is also for fertilizer. This is a box just for fertilizer. You could use it for seed too if you wanted. And these, so this is a little bit more simpler than that. It's got the coulter in the front. It's got the double disc openers where you can really see what they look like on this one. And then these press wheels back here press in the soil, and they're also where you adjust the depth on this one as well. So your no-till seed drills are going to be a lot heavier. They'll get enough pressure down into the vegetation than your standard seed drills. I want to talk a little bit more about planting green. So do you guys know by now, like, what's the benefits of planting green versus, say, killing 2 weeks ahead of time? Yeah, so when you're keeping the ground covered as long as possible, so that you're going to have less weeds. You're also going to get a lot more growth out of your cover crop. So all the benefits of the cover crop are going to be maximized. You're really shortchanging yourself if you terminate too early. There was a study that said there's a 137% difference in growth between the 15 days between whether you would have terminated or when you planted green. So that, there's a lot of growth potential there that you're losing out on if you terminate early. It's also another benefit. There's also other benefits. One is it actually can be easier to plant into a standing cover crop that's green than one that's been killed. The killed one can not be, it can be a little tougher to cut into, and also be laying in different directions and just be harder to plant into. So one that's standing is nice and ideal, because you can see, as there was nothing getting caught in the equipment. the stems will either go between the drills, or they'll get knocked over and lay in the direction that you're traveling. So when you're using, the roller crimper, did I mention that already? That different directions? Okay, I'm getting confused between different groups. So you don't have to worry about that when you're, yeah. So, and I talked about having the rye hold up vetch. Did I talk about that too? No. So like when you're doing mixes, so like if you want a lot of nitrogen, right? You think, well, let's just plant all legumes, right? Let's just plant all crimson clover or all vetch. Well, that's often not. That causes problems. Like in fact, planting into, even though it's short, the crimson clover, it's been shown that causes stand population issues with planting corn into pure stand of crimson clover versus a stand of like this, with rye and crimson clover. Often if you have just the legumes, it's a little denser and it's tougher to get the drill down into that, especially with hairy vetch. Hairy vetch can really vine and tangle over, and we've done it here where we had pure hairy vetch, and it caused issues with planting. It didn't work very well. However, if you have it with rye, they'll vine up the stems of the rye. Your population is a little less. It's a little less dense of the vetch, and they're all standing up straight. So when you go to plant, it lays down, and you can cut right into it. There was Ann Lynn asked me earlier about that the field up there with the discussion with pesticides. She asked me if that field had been treated with pesticides, and I said, or insecticides. I said no, because I thought it was just Roundup, but I forgot that some of the corn that we used was treated with insecticides. A lot of the corn that you buy, if you don't ask for untreated corn, you're going to get it with insecticides. It's going to have neonicotinoids on it or something. So that is actually, that's a big consideration. They were talking about invertebrates and soil health. Well, there's also can be an impact on the crop that you plant. Obviously soil health impacts the crop growth, but also just you think, well, the neonicotinoids, they're going to help prevent insect damage, and they also have fungicides on them as well to help prevent fungal diseases. But one of the things with planting no-till and with cover crops, one issue that there is slug damage. You can have a fair population of slugs because you have a lot of green material and residue around all the time, which is beneficial, but the slugs can eat your crop seedlings. So one issue with the treated seed is that it's been shown that the treated seed can kill, the insecticides in the treated seed can kill predators of slugs. So there's a lot of little predators that'll eat the eggs of the slugs and little baby slugs. But they are susceptible to being killed by those insecticides. So it's been shown that slug problems can increase after using treated seed. So that's another thing to consider. Another thing to consider with planting green is soil moisture. The cover crop is going to keep using moisture out of the soil, which could be a big benefit if your soils are wet, and that can actually help you get into the field a lot sooner than you would otherwise and plant your seed. However, if your soils are too dry, then you have to consider that you might have to irrigate because your cover crops are going to be pulling some moisture out. Typically, a conventional farmer might just run the seed drill into standing cover crop, and then after the seedlings reach the right stage, they can put down an herbicide, Roundup, like this Roundup Ready corn. They'll spray the Roundup and they'll terminate the cover crop and any weeds at that point. Another thing with planting green is if you're planting into rye or wheat, a cereal grain, is that there could be some nitrogen tie-up when it breaks down. So probably want to plant, fertilize, put some nitrogen down when it's at the planting time to help offset that. So that's another consideration. What was your question?
Does this one take 2 people to operate?
Yeah, so this requires a driver to operate the tractor, and then if you're not using the cone planter function, then it's just one person. If you're doing plots, then you need someone up there dropping the seed down. So it's a 2-person operation there. Like I said, we've planted into all vetch, and that didn't work quite so well. But other than that, not so much. Now, but we've had some hits and misses, and it could be that we're just not adjusting this machine. You know, like if there's a lot of residue, we probably need to set the depth deeper, because it's your depth is going to be. You have to add the depth of your residue. You know, so if your depth's too shallow, it might just be riding up on that residue and not even opening up. And I think that's mostly been our problem that we've had. But we didn't adjust enough, and it's just because we have so much difference in a lot of our fields. And you know, we might get one field that's really thick and heavy, and another one that's really sparse. So I think we're not adjusting enough between our fields, and so I think we'd be fine if we just increase the depth when we have real heavy vegetation.